The Galactic Council chamber was built to intimidate. Its ceiling vanished into artificial starlight, its circular tiers stacked with species that ruled trade routes, star lanes, and entire civilizations. Every sound carried, every movement judged. When the human diplomat stepped forward, he did so without armor, escort, or threat display, wearing only the insignia of Earth and the calm posture that had earned humanity a fragile place among the stars. Beside him stood his child, small, observant, taught to witness diplomacy rather than fear it, a symbol of trust in laws older than most empires present. The session opened with ritual courtesy, but the tension beneath it was unmistakable. Humanity had refused extraction rights, declined population quotas, and rejected the Council's security oversight. To the galaxy, these refusals were insults wrapped in legal language. Council members spoke in polished tones about balance, stability, and consequence, their words carefully sharpened. The child listened quietly, hands folded, unaware that patience was already running thin. Accusations followed. Humanity was called naive, reckless, emotionally compromised. One delegate suggested that Earth's presence was conditional, revocable if cooperation did not improve. The human diplomat responded with restraint, citing treaties, mutual defense clauses, and the shared prosperity humanity had helped build. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. That restraint was mistaken for submission. Security drones repositioned, a procedural adjustment announced without pause. A council enforcer species requested a demonstration of authority, a reminder of who controlled the chamber. Protocols shifted. Power surged through containment fields. No one officially gave the order, which made it acceptable. A flash of energy cut across the chamber, brief, clinical, and irreversible. The child fell before sound reached the stands. For a fraction of a second, the galaxy froze. Sensors confirmed cessation of life. Medical response was denied as non-essential interference. The council chair declared an investigation pending review, a phrase so rehearsed it carried no meaning. Several delegates averted their eyes. Others watched with detached curiosity, already calculating diplomatic fallout. The human diplomat did not move at first. He knelt slowly, gathering his child into his arms, blood staining the polished floor the council prized as sacred. His expression did not break. There was no scream, no plea, no threat. When he finally looked up, his eyes carried something colder than grief. They carried record. He asked a single question, quietly, formally, so it would be archived. Was this action recognized as lawful under council authority? The answer came without hesitation. The incident was ruled an operational error within acceptable parameters. No sanctions were issued. No apologies recorded. The council moved to adjourn. The human diplomat stood. He thanked the council for its clarity. Then he turned and left, carrying the body of his child through a chamber that had already dismissed the moment as inconvenience. No one stopped him. No one believed it necessary. The message reached Earth within minutes. It contained no commentary, no demand, no accusation. Only verified footage, biometric confirmation, and a timestamp. Governments received it. Defense networks flagged it. Archives unlocked in silence. Across the planet, systems that had not been accessed in centuries recognized the authorization code embedded in the transmission. The galaxy waited for outrage. It waited for war speeches, fleet movements, frantic negotiations. None came. Earth issued no statement. No ultimatum followed. Human space went dark, communications restricted to internal channels only. In the absence of noise, the Council congratulated itself. History had proven that humanity, like so many before, would mourn, protest, and eventually comply. They logged the incident as resolved. They did not realize that Earth had not gone quiet in grief. Earth had gone quiet to prepare. Earth did not erupt in panic or fury. There were no emergency broadcasts, no flags lowered in public ceremony, no speeches meant to satisfy grief with noise. The transmission from the Galactic Council chamber moved through secured channels only, reaching heads of state, defense councils, and systems that existed outside civilian awareness. Those who saw the footage understood immediately that outrage was irrelevant. This was not an accident to be corrected. It was a message delivered in blood. Within hours, borders closed, not to enemies, but to information. Civilian networks remained calm, entertainment streams uninterrupted, markets steady. To the galaxy, humanity appeared unchanged. Analysts mistook this for shock paralysis. Some interpreted it as fear. Others assumed internal division would soon fracture Earth's response. They had seen this pattern before in younger species. Inside Earth's deepest structures, a different reality unfolded. Representatives from nations that had once threatened nuclear war against one another sat without flags, uniforms, or translators. No one argued jurisdiction. No one asked who would lead. The evidence made hierarchy irrelevant. The question was not whether to respond, but how permanently. Ancient archives were opened, their existence known only to rotating custodians sworn into silence centuries earlier. Records older than humanity's first orbital colonies were decrypted. Blueprints appeared that no modern engineer had designed, written in mathematical frameworks discarded as theoretical dead ends by contemporary science. These were not forgotten because they failed. They were buried because they worked too well. The diplomat returned to Earth without ceremony. No crowds awaited him. No cameras followed. He was escorted directly underground, where grief was acknowledged privately and duty addressed immediately. When asked if he wished to speak, he declined. Instead, he transferred full legal authority to the Planetary Defense Council, attaching a single clause: no retaliation unless it ensured finality. Endless war was forbidden. Deterrence had already failed. Debate was brief and brutal in its honesty. Some argued for targeted punishment, sanctions enforced by force, a response proportional enough to satisfy law. Others rejected the idea entirely. The council had acted knowing the child was present. That made the act intentional in effect, regardless of wording. A system that allowed such behavior could not be reformed by warning shots. That was when the sealed designation was spoken aloud for the first time in generations. Not a weapon name, not a program title, but a doctrine. The ancient warrior was never meant to be remembered as technology. It was a solution humanity had sworn never to need, designed before it trusted the stars to remain rational. Its purpose had been singular: if Earth was ever judged disposable, the response would remove the incentive to make such judgments again. It was not bound to territory or fleet doctrine. It did not negotiate. It enforced outcomes so decisive that survivors would reshape their cultures around avoidance of repetition. Activation required unanimity. It was granted without hesitation. Across the planet, power grids diverted energy into conduits long dismissed as geological anomalies. Deep ocean platforms shifted, revealing structures fused into tectonic plates. Lunar installations powered on, their silhouettes altering Earth's reflection in space by fractions only instruments could detect. To outside observers, nothing happened. To those who knew where to look, the planet's gravity itself began to behave differently. Earth still issued no message. The silence stretched, deliberate and controlled. The Galactic Council grew comfortable again. They resumed trade discussions, logged the incident as resolved, and quietly downgraded humanity's diplomatic priority. What none of them understood was that Earth was not deciding whether to act. Earth had already decided. What remained was simply preparation for a consequence so absolute that no council, no empire, and no future aggressor would ever mistake human restraint for weakness again. The first sign that something had changed did not come from Earth. It came from empty space. Long-range observatories across multiple systems recorded a brief, synchronized distortion in background radiation, as if reality itself had been nudged aside and allowed to settle again. The anomaly lasted less than a second. Automated systems dismissed it as sensor drift. Older analysts felt unease they could not justify. Deep beneath Earth's surface, systems that had never known sunlight completed their awakening cycle. They did not boot or initialize. They remembered. The ancient warrior was not switched on, it resumed. Its core intelligence aligned itself with conditions that had been anticipated long before the first human left the atmosphere. Parameters were verified. Ethical constraints were loaded. Targets were not yet selected. The entity's architecture was unlike any known construct. It was not centralized, not singular, and not bound to conventional space. Components unfolded from locations the galaxy did not classify as military assets, asteroid belts that shifted formation, derelict probes older than recorded exploration, gravitational nodes mistaken for natural phenomena. Each piece synchronized without communication, bound by design principles that assumed interference and compensated for it automatically. As it assembled itself, the ancient warrior observed the galaxy. It did not scan for fleets or weapons. It analyzed decision-making structures, authority chains, and cultural tolerance for collateral loss. Its creators had taught it that violence was rarely born from necessity. It was born from confidence that consequences would be survivable. That confidence began to erode. Navigation beacons across Council space reported impossible readings. Star charts subtly disagreed with one another, as if reference points had shifted by microscopic degrees. No alarms were triggered. Nothing violated treaty definitions of hostile action. Yet trade captains altered routes out of instinct. Military patrols doubled back without orders, crews unsettled by a pressure they could not explain. Then the energy draw was noticed. Entire sectors experienced transient power fluctuations, not draining systems but harmonizing them. It was as though something was borrowing alignment rather than fuel. Attempts to trace the phenomenon failed. The source appeared everywhere and nowhere, distributed across space-time in a pattern no model could resolve. The Galactic Council convened an emergency review, irritated more than alarmed. Humanity was briefly mentioned and dismissed. Earth's silence was interpreted as withdrawal. Analysts proposed that the anomalies were relic effects of ancient alien infrastructure, dormant and irrelevant. The Council accepted this explanation because it required no response. The ancient warrior marked that conclusion. Only after its deployment vector stabilized did Earth transmit a message. It was not sent to the Council chamber but to every registered diplomatic archive simultaneously, ensuring it could not be suppressed or reframed. The message contained no demands, no accusations, no emotional language. It stated a single fact: humanity recognized the Council's ruling regarding the death of a child as lawful under Council authority. The galaxy relaxed. Legal acknowledgement implied closure. The second statement followed immediately. Humanity declared that it would now operate under the same interpretation of law. Moments later, the ancient warrior crossed the threshold into observable space. It did not arrive with a flash or shockwave. Space simply folded in a way it was never meant to, and something vast resolved from the distortion, its form defying classification. Sensors failed to define its mass because mass was not the correct concept. Weapons systems attempted target locks and reported success, yet firing solutions could not be generated, as if the object existed between intentions. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council felt something unfamiliar. It was not fear of destruction. It was fear of inevitability. Because whatever humanity had awakened was not approaching to negotiate, threaten, or posture. It was approaching to conclude. The first Council fleet engaged out of reflex, not strategy. Formation commanders interpreted the ancient warrior's presence as a territorial violation, nothing more. Orders were issued cleanly, confidently, following doctrines that had crushed dozens of rebellions before. Energy lances fired in disciplined volleys, saturating the region where the entity's outline had stabilized. Every shot registered a hit. Every impact returned confirmation. The crews waited for debris. There was none. The weapons had not missed. They had simply interacted with nothing that obeyed their assumptions. Energy dispersed, redirected along vectors that bent away from the target, bleeding harmlessly into subspace. The ancient warrior did not raise shields or counterfire. It did not react at all. That absence of response unsettled commanders more than resistance ever could. Attempts escalated. Kinetic strikes followed, then gravity weapons, then localized space-time compression. Each attack was recorded, analyzed, and rendered irrelevant in real time. Not blocked. Not absorbed. Invalidated. The warrior's presence altered the rules the fleets depended on without visibly breaking them. Physics still functioned. It just no longer favored the attackers. The counteraction began without warning. Not as an explosion or beam, but as loss. Entire squadrons vanished from command networks simultaneously, not destroyed but disconnected, removed from causality in a way sensors could not trace. Crews experienced a moment of silence, then nothing. Their vessels were later found intact, drifting, all power systems inert, every weapon fused at the molecular level as if they had never been built for war at all. Panic rippled outward. Secondary fleets scrambled. Emergency summits were called mid-battle. Council members demanded explanations from their admirals, then from each other. The ancient warrior continued forward, unhurried, passing through defensive lines as if they were ceremonial displays rather than barriers. Worlds under Council authority felt the shift next. Orbital platforms powered down in synchronized failure. Planetary shields deactivated without breach. Military command nodes lost access to encryption keys that had been considered mathematically unbreakable. No civilians were harmed. No cities were struck. The message was unmistakable. Resistance capability was being removed, not populations. The Council attempted communication at last. Signals were sent on every frequency, encoded with emergency precedence markers. This time, the channel opened. The human diplomat appeared, framed not by symbols of power but by absence of them. His voice carried evenly, stripped of anger or accusation. He informed the Council that their fleets had acted lawfully under their own interpretation of authority. Humanity recognized that legality. Humanity had simply expanded its jurisdiction accordingly. Negotiation was offered then, desperately, accompanied by promises of inquiry, reform, reparations. The diplomat listened without interruption. When they finished, he responded with finality rather than refusal. Justice delayed, he explained, was indistinguishable from permission. Systems that allowed the killing of children under procedure did not need reform. They needed removal. Leadership structures began to collapse immediately afterward. Council species found their governing bodies isolated, communications severed from their own militaries. Strategic hubs were rendered obsolete, supply chains unraveled, and political leverage evaporated overnight. The ancient warrior did not destroy institutions. It made them incapable of exerting force beyond their borders. The species responsible for issuing the fatal command received no warning. Their ruling caste vanished from public life in a single cycle, detained in facilities beyond known space, alive but stripped of authority, forever prevented from directing harm again. No executions were broadcast. No triumph declared. The ancient warrior halted its advance once the Council ceased to function. The war, if it could be called that, ended before declarations could be drafted. What remained was a galaxy forced to confront a truth it had ignored for centuries. Humanity had not sought domination. It had enforced consequence. And it had done so with a precision that made resistance meaningless. The galaxy did not celebrate when the conflict ended. There were no victory declarations, no parades of reclaimed authority, no speeches about unity. What followed was quieter and far more unsettling. Entire civilizations woke to find the structures that had governed them for millennia suddenly irrelevant. The Galactic Council no longer issued rulings because no one could enforce them. Its archives remained, its chambers intact, but its power had been hollowed out with surgical precision. Humanity did not claim leadership in the vacuum left behind. Earth rejected proposals to chair a new council, declined permanent enforcement roles, and refused tribute of any kind. Instead, it released a framework, simple, unambiguous, and terrifying in its clarity. Sovereignty was absolute. Children were untouchable. Diplomacy conducted under threat was invalid by definition. Violations would not be debated. They would be concluded. The ancient warrior withdrew as silently as it had arrived. Systems across the galaxy detected its departure not as movement but as relief, like pressure easing after a long-held breath. It did not return to a hangar or orbit. It dispersed, folding itself back into the hidden architectures that had sustained it, leaving behind no trophy, no monument, no symbol to worship or fear. Only memory. On Earth, there were no public announcements. The diplomat was not elevated to legend or office. He returned to a life deliberately kept private, his loss acknowledged without spectacle. Humanity honored the child not with statues or holidays, but with policy etched into law so deeply it could not be overturned quietly. From that point forward, every human treaty carried clauses that other species found excessive until they understood their origin. Across alien worlds, military academies rewrote doctrine. Strategic simulations were purged of assumptions about human restraint. Cultural histories were revised, not to glorify Earth, but to warn future generations about the cost of mistaking patience for weakness. Stories spread among traders and explorers, stripped of embellishment because none were needed. Humans, they said, did not rush to war. Humans ended it. Years passed. Trade resumed under new terms. Smaller species found unexpected freedom without council oversight. Empires learned to negotiate honestly or not at all. Disputes still occurred, violence still existed, but the scale changed. No one sought extinction-level dominance anymore. The galaxy had seen what followed that path. Earth remained watchful but distant. The ancient warrior was never referenced in official discourse, never brandished as deterrence. Its existence was enough. The uncertainty of whether it could awaken again shaped behavior more effectively than any threat ever had. Humanity understood that true power was not in repeated use, but in the knowledge that it could be used again if necessary. In quiet moments, far from councils and star charts, the question lingered among older species. They wondered what humanity had been like before the stars, what kind of world built something so final and then chose to bury it. The answer, when pieced together, was unsettling in its simplicity. Humans had always been like this. They endured. They reasoned. They forgave longer than most believed possible. But when a line was crossed so completely that forgiveness would invite repetition, they responded not with fury, but with resolve sharpened by history. The galaxy learned that day that humanity's greatest weapon was not the ancient warrior. It was the certainty that Earth would never allow such a crime to happen again.